The following is for informational purposes only. For medical advice, please see a medical professional.
Welcome to Staying Alive with Margaret and Susy. Today we're going to cover the topic of pain. And there's so many different kinds of pain, and all pain lies in the brain and lets us know we have pain. There's no objective measure for pain. If in other words, if we're asked on a scale of 1 to 10, how much pain do you feel? Different people might feel different levels. They're going to give different numbers. It's not something that we can really objectively measure, but it's something that really affects our lives a lot as we age. And it's different than acute pain. Acute pain is where when we touch a hot stove or get burned, our brain lets us know there's pain, or we sprain a muscle when we're doing some type of workout or something. We feel pain. But there's also a chronic pain, and the chronic pain is something that it can be on and off for no explained reason. Sometimes it doesn't go away at all. And as we age, we're more and more apt to be living with chronic pain. And that pain can be linked to other types of conditions we've developed, like arthritis. And our doctors tell us, oh, that's the pain of arthritis. And other times the pain can be like a complete mystery. And unfortunately, it's not uncommon for seniors to have pain that they don't even know what is the cause of it. But unfortunately, it's also not that uncommon that we are offered opioids to deal with our pain.
Right, right.
And
Opioids are so tricky too.
mhm,
I mean, it's really a shame. We've all heard of the opioid epidemic that's happened due to the overprescription of opioid medications. And I heard something today that was really interesting, that when people are prescribed opioids or when they become addicted to opioids, um, the opioids actually help them to keep remembering their pain. It's like a drug addict takes those opioids so they can, and then unfortunately, they're doing it to ease pain, but it just reinforces the pain. So then they have to use again. Whereas when you
wow,
you have natural opioids, that I'm sure we're going to talk about that a little bit,
a little bit.
but when we have endorphins in our body and things like that that help us produce natural opioids,
Hmm.
that actually helps you to forget your pain.
Yeah,
So I just thought that was really interesting.
yeah.
Yeah.
Today, Susie and I are going to talk about natural ways that we deal with pain and that we know about how to deal with pain in natural ways. And that brings us back to the anti-inflammatory lifestyle that we've touched on already in many episodes. Anti-inflammatory lifestyle helps us to prevent or manage diseases such as arthritis, but also things like heart disease and cancer. And it turns out that inflammation also plays a role in pain. And we've already told you, I think, that inflammation is a normal part of aging. Anything you want to add on that?
Well,
Inflammation and aging, Susie?
I actually asked my doctor recently, and
Mm-hmm.
she said, the interesting thing about inflammation is it's definitely tied to certain illnesses, especially some autoimmune illnesses like rheumatoid arthritis, psoriatic arthritis. But everyone's different in their inflammation markers. If you take a group of 10 people about the same age, measure their inflammatory markers, which you can do with a blood test, they'll all be different. So it's a tricky thing. I think inflammation is part of many, many illnesses, and it's definitely part of people's pain for sure. I
Mm-hmm.
have a sister who lives with chronic pain, and due to a autoimmune disease, and I asked her about that, and she said that when she follows an anti-inflammatory diet, it doesn't really improve for her, but she was already eating a healthy diet, right? And we're going to talk about diet later, but some things do increase her inflammation. So
Well, I
it's
can
really interesting.
segue into a little bit about that. And so, as I said, it turns out inflammation plays a role in pain. And so then we'd ask ourselves, and I researched, how does inflammation play a role in pain? It turns out that inflammation alters our nervous system's response to pain signals.
Ah,
And it releases chemicals like prostaglandins, and they make their nerve endings more sensitive, our nerve endings more sensitive. So when the nervous system is more sensitive, it's more sensitive to pain stimuli, and we
sure.
feel more pain.
Right.
So uh, with the natural lifestyle ideas that we have today, what we're going to talk about are the ways in which we have learned to keep our nervous systems calm in order to decrease inflammation, for sure, as a natural way, hopefully, to reduce pain. So I'm going to just touch for a moment on stress and sleep. And I'm going to talk a little bit about exercise. And most of the episodes, Susie's going to be talking about dietary things that we can do. So, how do we keep our nervous systems calm? Well, I mean, the first thing we might think of is stress management. Like if we're feeling pain and our doctor feels that we have inflammation going on in our body, you'll notice the doctor will say to you, how's your stress levels? How are you sleeping? How much alcohol are you drinking? What's your exercise like? What's your diet like? That they go over those things because they know that it affects. And so, stress management things that we do can vary. It doesn't have to be as complex as learning a specific meditation methodology or something. I mean, for me, I incorporate all these different things, except for the diet. I don't eat while I'm exercising. I combined my stress management and exercise together. So what I'll do is I'll go out for a solitary walk where I'm meditating while I'm walking. I get to the park. I spend some time enjoying the birds and the trees, and I incorporate that into my exercise program every day. And then I do all the things that I need to do to make sure I get a good night's sleep. And we've talked about that in another episode. And then I focus on my exercise plan. And so, what's interesting about exercise in particular with an anti inflammatory lifestyle and trying to reduce pain, I'm sure we've already all learned from when we were kids when we have acute pain, say we strain a muscle picking something up off the floor or out on the tennis courts or something.
Get a paper cut.
Well, I was going to say with those kind of pains and strains, we've learned to use something called um, RICE, which stood for rest, ice, compress, and elevate. And that's great for when we have an acute pain where we've just pulled something. But with the chronic pain in our bodies that we're talking about, what doctors now know is they're using a new acronym, and it's called MEAT, which stands for movement, exercise, analgesics, and therapy. And so I'm just going to spend a couple minutes on that. So, movement, as opposed to exercise, the E in the acronym, movement just means moving my body around, stretching, yoga, anything I can to move those areas that hurt, and then followed up by exercise. And there we're talking about more aerobic type of exercise, and depending on where the pain is, like say if you have pain in your knees, the doctor would really like you to get on an exercise bike in the gym, or if you have pain in your back, they might prescribe to you it's time to start swimming. So the point is we're working on exercises that will help to move and exercise those parts of our body that hurt. And we now know that exercise, even if it hurts when we're starting out, like I've noticed this a lot, I end up, it stops hurting. Like I might start out walking and it's hurting, and the next thing I know, it's it's stopped.
Better.
And so
Yeah.
the
Do you think,
endorphins are going up,
yeah, Margaret, do you
and
think that people, I think people, it's kind of counterintuitive
I
sometimes for
know.
people. They think, oh, I shouldn't be moving because I'm hurting,
Yeah,
and if I just lay
exact.
here, I'll feel better. And I think for so many years, that was the advice. How many times I've hurt my back and the doctor said, just rest. Well, guess what? I ended up doing physical therapy, learning some exercises, and it made all the difference in the world. Yeah.
Right,
Yeah,
right.
but I think it's new. It's
Yeah.
relatively new in the philosophy about it. Yeah.
And then so figure out whatever exercise programs work for you. Some people incorporate various different types of exercise,
Mhm.
but the point is move, 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 keep moving. And then analgesics, that is something not everybody thinks about, but the doctors, I mean, um, anti-inflammatories are anti-inflammatories. They
Yeah.
truly are anti-inflammatory.
Yeah, that's
And
right.
we're not doctors, we're not prescribing these analgesics. You have to talk to your doctor and find out what's right for you. Oh, I'm not going
Right.
to mention name brands, but
Right.
it's the over-the-counter anti-inflammatories that you'd get at any drugstore. Find out from your doctor what works for you and is okay for you based on various systems of your
Right.
body.
And some people aren't supposed to take ibuprofen. I'm not supposed to take it,
Hmm.
or whatever, any kind of analgesic.
Yeah.
Sometimes you just have to be
Well,
careful.
not, you can take Tylenol, can't you?
Yes,
That
I
is
can.
an
Yes, I
analgesic.
can. Yes,
That
I
is an
can.
analgesic.
So there are different
So,
types that
and
are
so
better
I've
for
just
different people.
named it name brand. I'm sorry about that, but
Well, it's okay, I think. I think it's okay.
it's like
But, you
that's what.
know, Margaret, too, I think people's pain is so different, and people, are anxious. Makes them anxious. And then they think, oh, should I take something? Should I not? I know people who won't take anything. And sometimes I think just give yourself a little bit of help. Sometimes you need just a little help.
Well, yeah, and I've learned that in the last few years from my doctors. I mean, doctors nowadays really disagree with them. Like their whole philosophy is get on top of the pain, get
Right.
ahead of it.
Yes.
And what I've learned with my body is like during the day, um, because I come from a family where there's tons of arthritis, so I've got that in addition, and it starts in your 40s, to be honest. It's not
Sure.
like just
Sure.
people who are over 60, 70. So what I've learned is that during the day, these healthy lifestyle choices are all I need. Sometimes if my arthritis is flaring up, when I need the analgesic when I go to bed at night,
Mm,
because I'm, I'm not moving around then, and 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 I need to get a good night's sleep. So there are
yeah.
times where I incorporate that, and that's all I want to say on analgesics. And so the last letter in that acronym T stands for therapy, and really talking mostly about physical therapy, but there could be other types of therapies that people like to incorporate in, like acupuncture, massage
Sure.
therapy. There's something new called dry needling, which sounds just like a Western interpretation of uh, acupuncture to me, but my sister told me just the other day that her insurance covers dry needling, and so great.
It's not
You know,
acupuncture, huh?
um, I don't know whether it is or not. You know
Oh,
what? I
okay.
don't know
Okay.
whether it is or not,
Yeah.
but I
Hmm.
know what they do with dry needling is they they target the nerves.
Oh,
They
huh.
target the
Not heard of
nerves
that.
in such a way that they interfere with the nerve sending pain signals.
Oh,
It's the newest thing. It's
yeah.
the
Well,
newest
there's
thing.
hydrotherapy. Yeah, there's different types of things that people
Mm-hmm.
can do.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You have to find out what works for you and um, you know, and you might
Yeah.
feel better. And the sad thing is that not all arthritis, for instance, mostly the arthritis that we're talking about is osteoarthritis, which is more of a condition of aging.
Yeah.
There's different
So,
types of arthritis that are autoimmune that you can get even at a young age.
mm-hmm.
Um,
So we're
so
only talking
yeah,
about things that we can
osteoarthritis,
control through um, an anti-inflammatory lifestyle. And so
right?
here I think is where we want to move on to the diet,
Oh,
because that
okay,
is something that you know so much about and have helped so much of so many people. And it may not be something that some people are considering. I mean, some people are doing great with
hmm,
meditation and exercise, but they're just eating any old thing. So tell us
right.
about how
Yeah, I think
diet factors
you
in.
know an anti-inflammatory diet can be a big key to controlling inflammation, and it's basically a healthy Mediterranean diet. Um, there's a few components that I think can help. They're not necessarily going to eliminate chronic pain, but they can help some people. And so, if there's a chance that they can help, why not try it? Because not only is it a help with inflammation, but it can help with other things in your life. So, probably one of the most important things is to focus on protein, but focusing on some plant proteins is really important. Think about whole grains, think about beans, nuts, as snacking on nuts. Trying to eat more fiber. Look, when you think about grains and you think about whole grains, try to encourage more fiber in your diet. Now, for women, the recommendation for fiber for women is only about, after the age of 50, is only about 21 grams. And for men over the age of 50, it's about 30. So that's kind of a change from when you're younger. There's a reasons, we aren't going to go into not to eat too much fiber, but try to focus on 5 a day, 5 cups a day of fruits and vegetables. The more fruits and vegetables you eat, the easier it will be to have less inflammation. There's some people focus on some herbs. Turmeric is one thing that is supposed to help with inflammation. Garlic, ginger. These things are supposed to help with inflammation too. Incorporating those things into your diet. I'm not going to focus on any supplements for those because I think it's a little controversial. But if you can get
Okay.
some turmeric, garlic, ginger into your diet, that'd be great. Cinnamon. Avoiding trans fats. When
Mm.
we've done an episode on fats, but I think it's important to avoid trans fats. Fortunately, there's not as many trans fats in our foods today as there used to be because they've
Mm.
removed them from a lot of food products. Trans fats, they add hydrogen to the fat, making it solid at room temperature, which is why they were so popular in the food industry. It made it easier for people to make foods. But they are definitely inflammatory. Limiting saturated fats, especially saturated fats from animals. Um, Saturated fat is good for you in many ways at a certain extent, but you don't want to just eat only saturated fat.
Okay.
Um, and then you can look at the omega 3s and omega 6 fats in your diet. Now, omega 6 fats are are essential as well, but most people overdo omega 6 fats.
Mm.
They eat too many of them. They're the kind of things that are in fast foods like chips and crackers, and they're the oils like safflower oil, sunflower oil, um, are typical things that are in fast food.
Mm.
And so important thing is to increase your level of omega-3 fatty acids. Now, omega-3s are the ones that are in nuts and also in salmon, good fish. So the trick is to try to have more omega-3s than omega-6s. So, I usually tell people to look at your choices that you're making. Um, are you eating nuts for a snack, or are you eating chips?
Mm.
It's real easy to grab things that are high in omega-6 fatty acids. So try to balance that. Try to increase your level of omega-3s.
Okay.
Basically, this is just a healthy Mediterranean diet, eating more monounsaturated fats like peanuts, olive oil. And what's really good for inflammation? Dark chocolate.
Okay.
To a limited extent, right? Or,
Okay.
because most dark chocolate has a lot of sugar in it. So, but to treat yourself to a piece of dark chocolate can help with inflammation. Now, that has to be, when I say dark chocolate, it needs to be at least 70% cocoa.
Okay.
So you'll see on labels when you go to the grocery store and you're looking for chocolate, some of them even say 85% cocoa, but at least 70%. And, close the kitchen at night. That's a big tip for inflammation
Ah,
because people have a tendency, I've been guilty myself, to snack at night before they go to sleep. And that can really not do well for your body. So try to not, if you're going to go to bed at 10 o'clock, try not to eat after 7.
mm,
It's usually about 3 hours they recommend. And some people even try to do what's called intermittent fasting, at least 12 hours with no food.
mm.
Um, Sometimes if you have diabetes or something like that, you can't necessarily do that. You have to have your meals be a little bit more steady. But, if you stop eating at 7, well, basically, you can have breakfast at 7, it's 12
Huh.
hours. So it's
Yeah.
really not all that hard.
No, it's
But I
not.
think if it's a habit that you've gotten into, um, it is tough to not snack at night when you're watching TV or watching a movie or something. And also try not to eat dinner so late. I know as I've gotten older, I've really tried to have food earlier in the evening, try to eat around 5 or
Mm.
so instead of waiting until 6 or 7.
Mm.
Yeah.
Is there any research about how sugar affects
Well,
inflammation?
sugar definitely affects inflammation. Yes. Yes, especially if you're eating it to an extent that is more than about 10% of your total calories. And when I talk about sugar, I'm not talking about fruits. I'm not talking about
Like,
natural sugars.
yeah,
I'm talking
I'm
about
talking
sugar,
about like soda pop and
right? Candy. Yeah,
mm-hmm,
candy, things that
mm-hmm,
are really sweet.
mm-hmm.
But these things can make a difference. And for some people, especially if you're not eating a healthy diet, um, you might want to take on some of these tips because it can help. And if it's
Yeah.
going to help, shoot, why not? Like I said earlier, my sister lives with chronic pain, and she did go on a really strict anti-inflammatory diet. She said it didn't help too much, but the one thing she did say is if she drinks alcohol, she can tell that she has more inflammation.
Oh,
Yeah.
well, I would say anybody who drinks alcohol is not on an anti-inflammatory diet. I'm sorry, that's
Well,
just my personal
yeah.
opinion.
Yeah, that's
And the
um
doctors are much more concerned about alcohol consumption in anti-inflammatory
mhm.
lifestyle that really than what we
Well,
eat, to
yeah,
be
it used to
honest.
be, the old Mediterranean diet was, wine was encouraged almost. And now they're rethinking that, definitely. It's being rethought. Yeah. It's such a prevalent part of our culture, so yeah, it's tough. So I think
But if you're
it's
living
worth a
in
try.
pain, you might be
Mhm.
willing to go to any lengths to try
Yeah, and I think,
anything you can to eliminate
yeah,
that pain in your life.
yeah. And when you think about stress and you think about sleep, um, I've heard a doctor say that, if you're tired, I know this is true for me. If I'm tired, and if I haven't slept good, or if I'm stressed out and I have pain, it's going to be way worse.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And so if you're living with intermittent pain,
Mm-hmm.
try and make a note of, maybe keep a journal. What was going on this day where I felt
Yeah.
no pain?
Yeah.
What was I doing the day before when on this day I woke up in so much pain?
Right.
And and see if you can find any type of correlation in anything in your
Right.
lifestyle that you might change.
And I also think it's important to recognize that as people age, some things just aren't as easy for them. You have to adjust what you do. For instance, there's
I would
nothing
say
wrong with,
for us, but I
yeah,
mean, you know.
yeah, maybe you
It's
don't
not.
want to take a full-on yoga class. Maybe you want to do a chair yoga class.
Mm-hmm.
And if you have chronic pain, my husband, for instance, has a bad neck from accidents. And if he does too much, if he overuses his neck for certain types of things like tree pruning, um,
Mm-hmm.
he's gonna, his neck is gonna bother him.
Yeah.
So it's important to recognize the kind of triggers you have and to try to avoid those things. And the other thing that I think is important about exercise in relation to pain is when you strengthen certain things in your body. For instance, if you have back pain and you can strengthen your core muscles even just a little bit, it's going to help so much. So
Right.
yeah,
Right.
can't go wrong with trying to do the things that are right for yourself.
Well, I feel like we've covered everything I would think
Yeah.
to cover. Is there anything else you want to add, Susie?
No, I just hope that people who are suffering from chronic pain can utilize some of these tips and help themselves and recognize that there is help. And
Yes. And even here, we can advocate for ourselves, and there are
mhm,
things that we can do.
yeah,
And we
that's
just
right.
don't have to accept this is just the way it is. There's nothing to be done about it.
Well, as a
Yeah.
person who doesn't live with chronic pain, I,
Mm-hmm.
I have a hard time even really imagining it.
Mm.
You know what I mean?
Okay.
So
Well,
I think
thank you for
it's,
helping those of us who do live with it. You've
yeah,
helped
that's
me a
right.
lot. So
Yeah.
we're going
Okay.
to leave
Well,
it there for today.
okay. Well, I
And
hope we've
so,
helped somebody, and
yeah, until next time,
we
we
are
are
staying
staying
alive.
alive.
You've been listening to Staying Alive with Margaret and Susie. This show is hosted by Margaret Cooley and Susie Hymas. To subscribe to our show, leave a comment or ask a question, please visit stayingalivewithmargaretandsusie.com. Our podcast is available on all major podcast platforms. If you've enjoyed our program, please feel free to leave us a 5-star review. Thanks for listening.